Shut up and sit down.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You still have distrust there.
We all come from very different places.
Man, we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
We deserve better.
People have to have the information in front of them.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
There you go. Like, just promote people who are doing something. Volunteer to work with people who you like. And
take an issue that's important to you and do something.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only.
Fight for liberty. This is the cherry on top.
But without further ado, we have a great guest in the house tonight. He is the chairman of the Oklahoma LP and the National Committee. He is the Libertarian in Chief, Mr. Todd Hagopian. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, David. It's treasurer of the National Committee, and I don't have a position in Oklahoma anymore, but I appreciate.
I don't know why.
Appreciate the promotion.
Treasurer. That all of my questions say treasurer, everything else says treasurer, but I knew I was gonna do that because I said it earlier. I was talking to somebody that I was having the chair on, and I'm like, that's gonna stick in my head, even though I know that's not right.
Perfectly happy with treasurer.
Angela just got booted, and Man. So I always like to start off with kind of a testimonial question, but since you've been on the show, we already know your libertarian testimony. So I want to know when you realized that you were a fan of money math.
So I basically got into kind of the finance realm of things probably not that long ago. I was always money math. You're talking something specific?
Honestly, in my experience, most of the different forms of money math come from the same love at a younger age.
Yeah. So, well, my grandpa was a stockbroker. I learned how to start investing when I was 10. I've been involved in money for a long, long time, trying to understand how companies are valued and how to make money and how to what good companies look like and bad companies look like. And then once I got old enough to start evaluating the government, I realized it was a bad company. and so as I was doing political science classes in college is probably when I really started getting into it and realizing how messed up the government was, and really trying to apply a lot of the stuff I learned to what's happening in government, and figured out that things were really going wrong. Then, obviously with the 2008 to 2012 period, I started learning more about the dollar and the Fed, and it kind of all spiraled down from there. And I ended up down here with you guys.
It's a great place to be.
Yeah.
That's awesome that you were able to start off at such a young age, like learning about that kind of stuff. I remember I was probably, it was like late middle school ish. My dad set up an account for me and my sister on this like fake stock trading like company, and like it was actually part of our grade being homeschooled for I want to think it was like 8th grade math, because there was some bit of like economics or like home ec math kind of in whatever grade that was, and so this was part of my grade, was to actually make money in this like 3 months that we had this account. And you know, he taught me to, you know, invest in stuff that you know about. So I sunk half of the money that I was given into Hasbro toys, because I was like, that's some shit I know about. I'm in like 7th grade. I know Star Wars and Marvel toys. So I did that, and then like some tech companies that I was looking at, and you know, I started watching like Yahoo Finance on a daily basis in middle school, and now I think the stocks are a hoax, but you know, it's still stuff you need to understand.
Well, and it's so cool that you're younger than me, right? So you actually had Yahoo Finance. So when I started, I bought, I think, $300 of McDonald's stock and $300 of Pepsi stock, because those are the two that I knew. You know what I mean? And we used to every Sunday open up the newspaper and see how the stocks did for the week, because that's how often you could check them. Now he obviously was a stockbroker. He had a computer at work and all that stuff, but that's when I got to see the stocks, was every Sunday they published it in the newspaper, and I'd get to see if it went way up or way down for the week. So back then nothing went way up or way down. It was always just kind of even.
That sounds insane. I can't even like really wrap my head around that, because from the time I started paying attention to it, like day trading was a very common thing. It actually like triggered something in my like hyper obsessive like ADHD brain, where I was just like I had a tab that was Yahoo Finance open like 24/7 and would click into that like in between answering, you know, 3 questions of homework. Oh, did the stocks do anything? Okay, cool.
It's crazy. I mean, we're talking 90 and 91, you know what I mean? So it wasn't even that long before. I mean, by 98, I was in the tech stocks, and I had, you know, the every day, every hour looking at things and selling in the morning and buying again in the afternoon, you know, and that kind of thing. And so just 7 or 8 years later, the whole market changed. But before that, it was really antiquated.
It's crazy how that was one of the first things to get as updated and integrated with the internet as it was. Because you know, you're talking 91, 92, that's like the original years of the World Wide Web at all, and for them to have come as far as they did in just a couple of years.
And Yahoo Finance, if you remember, used to be updated 15 minutes, so like it would be 15 minutes late, you know what I mean? Now you see it right away, but it would be 15 minutes late. And so even when the tech thing started exploding in 98, 99, things would be moving. You know, I'd call my broker to sell something, and it'd already be down 3 more points, you know, by the quote I'm seeing on Yahoo. It's like,
oh man, that sounds horrific. So let's talk about Reno. I unfortunately wasn't able to go. And I haven't had anyone on the show since Reno that did anything remotely important at Reno. I haven't had any of the newly elected LNC, no one. So tell me, how was the atmosphere there? Like, what was your mindset going into it?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, I obviously when I won treasurer, I went caucus neutral, so I'm not in the Mises caucus anymore. But right up until Reno, I was very involved, you know, so I kind of had a pretty good idea of where we stood. I was an Oklahoma organizer. The caucus just had an extremely good read on what was going on. So we were very organized. We knew almost exactly the number of delegates we were bringing in by state. We kind of had a feel for who was a strong delegate and who was kind of a moderate, you know, supportive delegate and that kind of thing. And so, I mean, I felt pretty confident going in that the caucus was going to do strong. I felt reasonably confident that I was going to do strong against Mr. Hagan. So we had a plan. It was that last week was pretty rough because things started to explode, and all kinds of stuff was going on, and you never knew exactly who was going to show up to Reno and who wasn't, because it's always hard to get people to pay $1,000 to go to a convention.
Yeah.
But
that was the rumor. Sorry. The rumor I heard was that, you guys had taken all of the delegate slots in throughout the state conventions and then weren't going to be able to get them all there. And so that there was still hope for the opposition or whatever.
I mean, and that happens no matter who gets it. I mean, Oklahoma elected 18 delegates. Sorry, might have been 21 delegates, and we only had 14 slots, and like 21 came. And at the last day, we only had 13 active. You know what I mean? So, so even people, or some of those 21 didn't show up, and then other people left partially the way through. Like that just happens during convention. So it's always a little bit nerve wracking, no matter what your numbers are, because if everybody walks out during a certain vote, all of a sudden you don't have the vote anymore, and then some states can bring in other people from other states, and everybody's got their own different rules, and so you never really know what's going to go on at convention. But I would say out of the 3 I've been to, this was kind of the this was the most organized. It was definitely a different feel. It was just, and by the time we all got there, we were looking around, and everyone's kind of we had a good feeling once we all got there. It was like, okay, we did our head count and we're feeling pretty good. I had a lot of comments the night before the election, from the old guard, kind of, it's not going to go the way you guys think. And I just kind of bit my lip and was like, okay, but I can math. So I'm feeling pretty good.
I think of all of the people on your slate, you had the least of the worries. Even with my kind of neutrality going into that, I was talking to people on both sides, and I would tell people what my ideal slate would be, and most of the people that I talked to on the non-Mises camp, it was I hate everyone you just mentioned except for Hagopian. I'll probably vote for him because he's clearly the best choice. It's like, I care about the party enough, because even every other chair candidate endorsed you, didn't they?
I don't know if they were official or not, but it felt like I had quite a bit of support. It was, it was one of those things where it's like, you never knew how it was going to happen, because I was also the only one going up against an incumbent. You know what I mean? Like a true incumbent. Karen Ann had a intermediate incumbent who had been kind of appointed, but I had somebody who had been elected for 10 years. So you never really knew how that was going to play, because Hagan, everybody likes Hagan. He's one of the nicest guys in the party. There's nothing wrong with him. But at the same time, I felt like I kind of was a middle of the road Mises guy, and people understood that I had the experience, and I ended up getting 76% of the votes. I had the highest total, and that was a big vote of confidence from everybody. I think it was just a matter of, we laid out a vision that was very different than how the party's been run, and people were good with that, and we'll see if it comes to fruition. So
yeah, I think even if you consider yourself a pragmatist, or you have to go with the person who's pragmatically the best choice, and from your resume, it's you. Regardless of caucus affiliation.
And that's kind of what I tell people is like, it doesn't matter what caucus you're in when you're dealing with money. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a matter of, are you better at budgeting? Are you better at strategy? Are you going to keep the party safe? And I've just got a lot of experience in the finance side of things. And I ask people to just forget about the rest of the stuff. And it seemed like a lot of people did. So,
yeah. So for somebody that's watching this show, who's going, maybe like county or state treasurer is something that I'm thinking about running for in the next at the next convention, what are some of the key skill sets that you think a treasurer should have before they get elected?
Yeah. So before they get elected, probably the number one thing is just being conscientious. You know what I mean? So the biggest thing on a treasurer is you have to be able to adhere to dates. You have to be able to keep track of them. if you have good budgeting skills, that goes a long way because most states don't. You know what I mean? So, and this all sounds rudimentary, but that's really what a treasurer needs to be, is somebody who protects the fiduciary duty of the committee. So, I came in when I was in the Oklahoma treasurer. I came in and just changed the way we did a budget and outlined exactly what money could be spent on and when, you know what I mean, and laid out the whole year. And before that, a lot of the discussion was like, well, we can't really budget because we don't know how much money we're going to make. And it's like, okay, well, like, let's try and come up with a way that we can forecast better, right? And so what did we do? We changed our entire membership model to monthly membership. So now we know exactly how much we're going to get every month. It's $620 a month. And if we lose a couple members, it'll be 610. And if we gain a couple members, it'll be 630. But we get this money coming in every month, plus whatever fundraising we do. You know what I mean? So like, we listened to the complaint, which was how could we possibly forecast, new members and this and that. And we said, okay, well, let's change the model so that it's much easier to figure out how much money we're going to have. And then we can tell how much we can spend next year. And so now we can plan big $4,000 things, whereas before we couldn't. So I guess first, like, dates are important because you're going to have all kinds of filings. Most of those filings are pretty easy to learn, but you do need to learn how to do them, not before you get the position, but right after. And then you have to remember, okay, it's the first, 15 days of the quarter afterwards, I've got to file this, or depending on what state you're in and that kind of thing. So, but as far as the skill set goes, I'd say if you're good with budgeting and you can adhere to dates, you're probably well qualified. You just need to then take it really seriously afterwards. There's a lot that can go wrong. Yeah. It's not a hard job, but there's a lot that can go wrong if you do it poorly. So.
Yeah, I think that first point is the main reason why I've never even considered a position like that since I joined the party, or even like other organizations prior. I've been in the finance world for most of my life, usually on the sales side, not the actual numbers side. But I've been a a finance person. My mom has an accounting degree. She made me like money math oriented at a very young age. I have never gained the I guess just like personal accountability to actually be the person that's like, oh, I have to remember to do this thing on this date. I can't take a random job and be in Tennessee. I can't like be at the mall. I just have to be at my desk doing a thing.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Like it happens to the best of us. Like I'll sit down on the 29th and be like, crap, this is due tomorrow. And it's a ton of work, you know what I mean? And so you stay up for 2 nights in a row and you get it done by 11:59 tomorrow, you know what I mean? So like it happens, you just have to get better at it. So like I tried to put things in place where every month I was doing a portion of it instead of right at the end of the quarter, you know what I mean? And then also just trying to get things in place where it's like, okay, all I have to do is grab these 3 Excel sheets at the end of the quarter and then just blast it through, you know what I mean? And so once you start setting up operations and automatic stuff, it gets a lot easier. But that, of course, happens at the end of your term. At the beginning of your term, you have no idea what you're doing and you're trying to get everything straight. So.
If you're lucky, you're taking over from somebody who already had a system in place like that. But most states in the country don't have a treasurer that's doing that. We're lucky here in New York. We have a really good treasurer. So I've seen at least on the the things that we've talked about thus far. But I want to kind of delve more into something you touched on in your answer, which was the knowing how to spend money and how much it was coming in. I feel like most parties run their money like a person instead of like a company. And so they're not in that spend money to make money mentality. They're in the if we can just keep saving, just keep making little bits and tucking away those couple dollars a week and into the piggy bank, and eventually maybe we'll have enough money to run a ballot access thing once every 4 years or something like that, instead of spending money on marketing and conventions and events and candidates and all these other things to actually make that money back because people are seeing you do something and actually want to donate.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I don't know if you're familiar being in business with the RACI concept, responsible, accountable, consulting, and inform. But basically what we did is we did a mini RACI in our state. And essentially what it was is like, okay, membership donations are on the treasurer, fundraising donations are on the development director, and then from a expense side, we said fundraiser or the development director had this much to spend on fundraising. And so basically the development director was in charge of spending this much to make this much. The vice chair was in charge of spending this much on convention to make this much on convention. You know what I mean? I had a target as a treasurer of getting this much in individual donations in. And so everybody had the accountable buckets that they were supposed to do. And that made it much more to where we could start to see like, okay, yes, fundraising is getting the ROI that we needed it to do, or we need to buck it up and do something different. You know, so-and-so isn't spending any money, and we have to get that money spent in order to accomplish this goal. And so we had that for every single line of the budget. Somebody owned it, and that helped a lot, you know, get us to where last year in Oklahoma, for the first time, we funded candidates. So we funded 4 candidates filing fees to get on the ballot statewide. We did a state fair. We did fundraising, you know what I mean? Like but it was good because nobody got overloaded. Everyone was doing their job and was responsible for their little part of the puzzle.
I like that. I think one thing we do here in New York that is a little weird, it kind of works, but it doesn't have the, you know, kind of growth potential that a different system is. We basically have a couple of donors that we count on to fund like different things. So like, for instance, there's one person who's part of the New York City party who is gay, and he funds our booth at the Pride Festival every year. And like we can count on him for that couple $1,000s. I think it's like $5,000 or something like that for the booth and the spot in the parade and everything. We can count on him for that $5,000 every year. He spends that $5,000 every year. He pays for it directly because off and on he's also been the treasurer of either the city or the state party. So most of the time he's just doing it directly. It's coming out of his account into theirs and never touching the party at all. And it works, but like I said, it doesn't have any sort of growth potential. We have that box checked, and so we can't really fundraise off of that because that would be dishonest. And we can't really ask him for more money because he did that thing and that's all he's going to do. And, you know, he feels like he's satisfied the party. And, you know, I don't think he does, like we deserve more money from him. He's been really consistent. He's a great guy. But I think that, you know, what you're talking about where all of this is actually going through the party and being budgeted out and being forecasted for next year. How can we do more next year than we did this year? I think it works a lot better.
Yeah. And even in that scenario, like some things that we've done in the past is like, all right, can we, if we have a big donor that's coming in, you know, is there a way to do matches off of that donor? You know what I mean? So find something that guy's passionate about and say, okay, we're going to announce that you're paying $5,000 towards the Pride Festival. You know what I mean? And it'll match 5,000 extra if people put in, and it'll go towards whatever the other, you know, and so it's just a way, because you really want to do that specific marketing towards specific events. So if he can put 5 towards Pride plus X, you know what I mean, and match the next 5 towards Pride plus X, you know, all of a sudden you can raise potentially $10,000 and do one extra thing. It's just one way of doing it. I know the national party's done that a lot over the years, where they'll always constantly say, you know, hey, we've got a match program going on right now. And that usually starts with somebody saying, I want to put 5,000 in. And the national party will talk to them about what they want to drive, you know? So.
Yeah, that is one of the most surefire ways to get me as a person to donate. Because if you tell me that my money is going to count twice, especially as somebody who hasn't been in the financial position to do a whole lot of donating throughout my life. A lot of times when even like the National Party or the State Party or you know, some other organization is like, we're trying to raise $25,000 to do X. I'm like, I have $6 in my bank account. I could give you 5 of them because I get paid tomorrow, but what's that really going to do? But if you tell me that $5 means $10 for you, it only means $5 for me. It's now the most fiscally responsible decision to give it to you. And so that gets me almost every time I see it.
And then the other two things that help there is if it's something either specific, like that is going to go towards X, and I'm passionate about X, you know what I mean? Or if I understand what it's going to pay for. So the two best things to do is be like, okay, this is going to go towards the Pride Festival, or your $5 will pay for, 15 letters to registered libertarians. You know what I mean? Like if you can quantify something, or it's a cause that people are interested in, that's the best way to get people to throw down a little extra money. Because what I tell people a lot is and treasurers need to think about this too, is most of us know how much money we're going to give away each year. I do. Okay. So I know about how much money I'm going to give all of the libertarian causes each year. I might give all of it to National one year, all of it to Oklahoma one year, you know what I mean? But I have this number in my head. And the only way to get me to spend more than that is what you're talking about. Is like, okay, now I got passionate about something, so now I'm going to drop, another $500 over here because it's a one-time thing, and I'm going to do it because I'm excited about it. You know what I mean? So that incremental giving is really what needs to be targeted. How can you get people to just give a little more than what they had planned on already? Otherwise, you're just basically, it's like a convention. Everyone comes with $200 in their pocket. They're going to leave with zero. They're not going to spend 201. They're just going to spend the 200 that they came with. Like that's how we all do, our state conventions and whatnot. So you need to find a way to get that incremental dollars.
Yeah. I think a lot of the problem with just fundraising in general for libertarians is that you've got a lot of people who have never been in the mindset that you just described of the, I know how much at the beginning of the year I'm going to give away at the end of it. It's when you can't have people who have lived paycheck to paycheck their entire adult lives trying to talk to people who don't. Without at least understanding the difference. Like I personally have trained myself to understand people who are richer than me so that I can make money off of them for most of my life. But a lot of people who are making these donor calls, they don't know that kind of stuff. They think that they're calling somebody that's going to just make like an impulse buy, and they're not. They've already hit that number, and there's nothing you're going to do to talk them over that number. Or they're nowhere near that number, and you're selling them such a lowball estimate where you could get $5,000 out of this person. And you're like, hey, can we have $10?
And that's the biggest crime, is that because none of us make enough of those calls. You know what I mean? So almost always when you're talking to people, you're talking to somebody who has more to give. You know what I mean? Like even when I say no to somebody on a fundraising call, chances are I haven't hit my limit yet. It's just a matter of like, today's not the day. You know what I mean? Like you caught me at a bad time. Today's not the day. You didn't say anything that makes me want to give you money. You know what I mean? I'll give it another time. So
I did a number of donor calls for an organization that was working in Georgia during the runoff, and a lot of the no's that I got were basically, I'm just going to keep giving the way that I'm giving. Which is another thing people don't understand, is you don't have to just sell your thing. Most of the time, those dollars are budgeted somewhere, and you have to steal it from another organization in their mind. And so you have to say, I'm better than Vote Blue because this. Maybe don't say that out loud, but you have to pitch them why they don't need to still give to Vote Blue or Planned Parenthood or something like that, because they're giving to you now, or at least can lower their donation there or something like that. But you mentioned like talking about specifically how the money's being spent in the fundraising. I think one of the most successful things I've ever done as far as fundraising goes was with the Tulsi Gabbard campaign. We ran a sponsor a volunteer program.
Okay.
Because we had a whole bunch of people like myself who were completely unpaid volunteers who were just being housed and fed and given a car to use. I was driving like a 98 Toyota Camry or something like that. That was somebody had bought in New Hampshire after the campaign got there. We were all living a very, low cost life, kind of in an Airbnb, like 10 of us, but none of us were getting paid, but the campaign was keeping us alive. And so, we called it good. And so we ran a campaign that was like, if you, X amount of dollars a month, houses a volunteer for that month, X amount feeds them for that month, that kind of thing. And we didn't push it as well as we should have, so it wasn't as successful as I think it could have been, but we got quite a few like recurring donors off of the idea of like, I'm just keeping a volunteer alive in New Hampshire. I'm the reason they're getting food. That means a lot.
And it goes back to that. Like if people can put their finger on what is actually being spent with their money, they're much more willing to do it. You know what I mean? If my $10 is just going into this $1 million bucket, it doesn't mean as much as if I'm keeping David, adopt David kind of thing. It's like the African kids, adopt this kid for $5 a month, people turn that on and leave it there forever, but I mean, if people can put their finger on what they're actually donating, it's a big deal. One of the more successful ones we did in Oklahoma was a metal business card. So it's kind of like a membership card, but it was just a metal business card, and it was OKLP member, and it cost us literally $4 or $5 to get these things produced. We sold them for $50, and then we said, if you buy a lifetime membership, you get it for free, and it'll say lifetime member on it. And so lifetime member at the time was $250. We've raised it since then. But we raised like $2,500 on this thing, and it cost us maybe $200 worth of metal cards. So I mean, and that's going back to something tangible that you get, like you know what I mean, like American Express. If you get one of their metal cards, it costs you $50, to get one. So we just priced it like that, and people bought it, and so again, was that incremental? In our mind and on paper, it certainly looked like it. That was money that people were spending that they wouldn't normally spend that year, because our fundraising went up X amount. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the way to really see at the end of the year whether or not what you did worked. Is did I raise a total that was more than last year?
Yeah.
Because I think something that people do, and myself included, is you'll see one thing not go quite as well this year as it did last year and get kind of discouraged, but what you're not realizing is that the money got pulled out of that into a different thing that you did that you didn't do at all last year, and that still raised a total of more than what you lost from the other thing, and you're still in the positive, even though convention didn't raise any money because everybody was holding on to their money for the whole candidate forum thing you were doing a couple months later.
Exactly. Yeah, and we've run identical fundraisers in June and then September, and one made a killing and one didn't. There's a lot of things that can go into it, and you just have to learn from it. Like I remember doing a deep dive afterwards and being like, all right, well, we paid for lunch and we did this and we did that in the September one. You know what I mean? And none of that was really talked about beforehand. It just got done, and that ate into profits by 80%. You know what I mean? So like, same amount of revenue, no profit.
Yeah.
because we just like threw stuff in at the last minute for no reason really whatsoever. We just decided it would be cool if we did X, Y, and Z, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't there that day, and spending got out of control, and I looked afterwards and I'm like, what the?
Yeah, that's one of my big problems with fundraisers and stuff, is I always end up spending more than I should, because it's like, oh, I mean, it would be great if we had like an open bar or something, and that's never a worthy investment for a fundraiser. Open bars are expensive.
Yeah, and you always should have things approved beforehand and whatnot. Like we just made a couple mistakes, but the one thing that we did do in Oklahoma that was interesting that other states should consider is we put in what we call a backstop. And what this is so a lot of people are afraid to, like, for example, the coin thing, right? If the coin thing hadn't worked, we still would have been out $200 because you had to buy a minimum of 50 coins. Okay. Or not coins, the business cards.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had to buy a minimum of 50. We would have been out $200. So we put in a backstop. And what that is you can spend up to, let's say, $500 on a fundraiser, not knowing if it's going to work. And then whatever the fundraiser makes, it pays back what you spent. And then the extra goes into the profit. And then you still have $500 in the backstop, so you can fund the next fundraiser. And we actually moved the backstop to 1,000, I think, this last year. But basically allowed us to, and then we didn't use it, of course. We should have, but we didn't. But basically it allowed for, taking a very risky fundraiser if we decided to. And to your point earlier, spend money to make money. So if we found something that we thought if we spent 1,000, we could make 4 on, you know what I mean? Then we could spend that 1,000 on the backstop budget. The first 1,000 goes back to the backstop and the rest goes into profit. And then you've still got 1,000 there for the next one. And that's actually been really successful in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I remember my first elected position within the LP was Manhattan's events director. And I tried to throw a watch party for the Democratic primary debates.
Yeah.
And what I went to a committee meeting and asked for, I think I asked for $50. It might have been 100 for like decorations and advertisement, because I wanted to, like print out flyers, put them up places, maybe run a Facebook ad for the event. I had a somewhat put together budget of how I was going to spend the money and whatnot. And, it was very low amount of money. We're talking like just a couple people's annual dues or whatever.
Yeah.
Something that I knew we had in the bank too, because, they give a budget report every meeting. And I got told no, even though, we were going to charge a ticket price. I ended up still doing the event. It just wasn't super duper successful. And I paid out of pocket for like the flyers and stuff. But I got told no, I couldn't have any money from the party to throw this event because, we don't know if anybody's going to show up.
Yeah.
And, I would have recouped I think I needed to sell like 7 tickets to recoup what I was going to spend, which everyone in the room showed up, which was more than 7 people. So, we got that money back. I made probably like, I think $250 on the event and spent maybe 30 of my own dollars. But it could have been a lot more successful if they were willing to actually do something.
And it's so critical to build flexibility into your budget for things like that. So like, what we have like, I think $1,200 for field development. You know what I mean? And what that is like all the regions can go to him and pitch stuff like you just talked about, or some random balloon festival. And, in Joe Blow, Oklahoma, there's a balloon festival and it costs $50. Okay, here's $50, and let a region host the table. And basically he owns that $1,200 budget and he can dole it out to do as much, outreach as possible. And then,
Is this in Oklahoma or the national?
Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah, Oklahoma. And so national is a different animal because you basically, the staff really, people don't understand how national works. The staff really spends the money in national. You know what I mean? We set the budget originally and then the staff spends the money. The LNC can dictate some spending, but the staff for the most part is spending 90% of the dollars. Yeah. You know what I mean? In national. So, but in Oklahoma, it's a little more relevant because we have elected positions that do certain things and we can give them a budget. And that's where, a random member can come and say, I want to do this. And, states should be able to be flexible enough to do that. Doesn't mean every idea is a good idea because they're certainly not, you know what I mean? But,
oh, yeah. But, I've pitched some ideas that my state turned down for good reason. That's for sure.
Exactly. And I have too. I mean, there's definitely ideas out there that are tough to make work, but, we try and make it so that you have to come and you have to at least get either the guy who owns the budget to agree, or you have to come to the state executive meeting, and get the state ExCom to agree. And so it's a good, and I always ask the same questions. People are really used to it. I'm not on the XCOM anymore, but I used to ask the same questions. How much revenue are you going to get? How much is it going to cost? What is the risk? And so it starts getting people to think about it in that way.
Yeah. The very last thing I did as a state committee member here in New York before I left, and I was planning to move is why I left, and now I'm stuck in New York again. But and I don't talk about this one too much on the show because I don't like shitting on people. But the very last thing that I did was I sponsored a volunteer day idea. It was a copy paste of what they're doing in Indiana right now, because Evan McMahon started this off in Indiana, and I really love how they do it. And it's basically every, I think it's like third Saturday of the month, a different region hosts some sort of volunteer thing. And the catch is that it's not for publicity, it's just for doing the thing. And it's technically mandated onto these regions to do this thing by the state party. And so I pitched this at the state committee meeting, and I got more pushback on that than anything else I've ever done in the Libertarian Party. And it was ridiculous. And, to the point where people were talking shit on Facebook afterwards, and, how dare the state committee of supposed libertarians, do this mandated spending on the county parties. And, it's, oh, fuck. He used the same term as we use when the actual state does it, of, unfunded mandate or whatever.
Exactly.
And it's just and all I was pitching was a park cleanup or something. So, sure, your county is going to spend $15 on trash bags and, maybe gloves for people who are a little squeamish, and big fucking deal. If that's your struggle, I will give you the $15. I don't have much, but I'll give you that if this is really the struggle here. And, it was really discouraging because I watched Indiana take this and run with it and get some incredible success and growth out of it, and just some amazing potential there. And then I watched my state and have a third. I won the vote. We passed the measure, but nothing actually happened with it because I left, and the person that got tasked with it didn't really do much with it. And then they also left shortly thereafter. But just a chunk of my state was like, no, this is a terrible idea. How dare you tell me that I have to go out into my community and do things and talk to people?
And it's not even unusual. We had the exact same thing, believe it or not, type of thing in Oklahoma. We had a big discussion about regions this last convention, and people wanted to put in stuff where it was your region has to host an event, otherwise you don't get a rep, you know what I mean? Versus this region who does get a rep on the XCOM and this and that. And it was just a really interesting conversation. I was actually against this, but for other reasons, but it was a really interesting conversation because we have a budget where the people can literally go and get the money to do it. They don't even have to pay the $15. You know what I mean? All they have to do is ask for the money and they get it to do the event. And people were like, well, we haven't done events before. It's silly that we have to. And then there's other regions that have been around forever but never do events. And there's regions that used to do events but haven't in the last 2 years. So should they get punished? You know what I mean? And it was just a really interesting discussion. But you're right. I mean, the way, everyone's like, how do we grow libertarianism? Well, it's definitely not with the 15 people who come to every state event. You know what I mean? That's not how we're going to grow it. It's definitely not the same 15 people arguing about 3 words in a bylaw proposal, for 4 hours at convention. It's going to be through outreach in the community. And everyone has their strengths. And I think that's where it breaks down, is some people can't get their head around, I have to go out and talk to people, because that's not my strength. When I was a regional rep in Oklahoma, I was the Tulsa region rep. Okay. And I did 4 events. That was super outside of my comfort zone. Like, I could care less to talk to strangers. I don't like walking around Tulsa. I don't, like these aren't the things that I like to do. I'd rather be on a podcast or do math or, do ridiculous stuff, so, be on state calls and whatnot. And so it was different for me, and it was pulling teeth. I mean, we have a huge region in Tulsa, and we'd get 4 to 10 people to show up. You know what I mean? And it's just like you said, it was just discouraging. And then you'd get more than that to show up at the state convention 4 hours away. They'll come to the state thing, they just won't come to the regional thing. It's really frustrating.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what has to change if we really want to grow region by region. You're right.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I really enjoyed in the Tulsi campaign was we did bi-weekly trips from New York City up to New Hampshire, where we spent probably 90% of everyone's time and money and energy was New Hampshire. So we were close enough to where we would do these bi-weekly trips up there and spend a night or two in New Hampshire, and just door knock all day Saturday, be back home Sunday afternoon. All these people just working normal jobs, and you got to very easily tell who was actually in it and who wasn't because they were on these trips. And if they weren't, then they weren't really listened to. And it was slightly like a toxic cliquey thing of you're not there for all the team building and the 6-hour drive and everything else. You're not really part of the group. But there weren't a lot of people in that category. There weren't many people in the group chat that weren't in the cars, or at least, off and on. Some people couldn't do it consistently, or like they had kids, then I understood. But it was a large majority of people were actually showing up to these things. And when we did like park cleanups and stuff in New York, even more people showed up because it was in New York. You weren't traveling to New Hampshire. And it was a really encouraging atmosphere of people that were actually trying to make a difference, trying to do the thing, not just have conversations on a Zoom call or a WhatsApp thread. And it's something that every time I go out of the party to some other campaign or organization and then come back, it's super discouraging to come back into this organization that's like 80% keyboard warriors, and most people don't want to show up to anything. But I do think it's like a catch-22 that too many people like that are in leadership, where there aren't any events for the people who want to do events to have been brought in and then actually do them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. And then and we talk about it a lot. The most active people in the state, tend to end up as the leaders of the state party or the candidates. You know what I mean? And so they're busy doing other stuff for the party, when they could be doing these things, or they can't do everything. You know what I mean? Like we had our former chair, Will Doherty, it was a fantastic chair, but before that he was our legislative director, and he was doing protests at the jail, and he was doing this and that. You know what I mean? And we were constantly doing stuff in Oklahoma City. And then as he took over for chair, he became extremely busy with all kinds of nonsense things that chairs have to do, and then we didn't backfill him, in the right way. And there just wasn't as much done on that side. It's just, I think a lot of it comes down to that. We just have all our best people doing these positions, and they can't get out there and rally the troops. And sometimes, we talked about doubling the XCOM and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, we need less, it's not like we need a smaller team in charge. We just need less people with big jobs so that we can do more candidates and more door knocking and, and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I think something that we should be self-aware enough to realize we need to do more of is like training our replacements. Because it's something that every high turnover company is like fully aware of, that they're a high turnover company, and they just have built into it that everyone that is above entry level position is in some sort of training position, training the entry level people, and so on and so forth, to where any person can drop and the person under them can step up because they've been trained. And we're such a high turnover organization. We burn people out quickly. We should know this by now.
Yeah. And it's such a good point. And I brought up a stupid analogy when we were coming in the run up to our election in Oklahoma. But I was like, man, when I was the fraternity president 100 years ago, you know what I mean? Like I got the e-board elected with me. And then everybody on the executive board ran for president when I was done. Do you know what I mean? Like I literally had every one of them ready to run, and they all ran for president, and only one won, obviously. But like there were 5 guys ready to take over. You know what I mean? And that's how you're supposed to do it. And even in Oklahoma, we didn't do a great job. We turned over all but one position in Oklahoma, so like 8 out of 9 or something like that.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? And so that's terrible. Now, luckily we don't have the factions that everybody else seems to have. You know what I mean? So like I'm working with the new treasurer, and I did find him to take over for me and stuff like that. But I mean, it wasn't like I lined up 3 people. I lined up 1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And had no idea if he was going to win or not. You know, so yeah, and so like luckily in Oklahoma it's working that we're close to each other and we're all helping each other on board. But when you do have factions, which we have in plenty of states and the nationals, you know what I mean? Like very few national people have reached back and helped the people who took over. Very few people who took over have reached forward and asked for help from the previous board. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how it's going to be, to your point, like a lot of times. And then we've even seen it in national staff. You know what I mean? That high turnover there with nobody kind of getting people ready in the wings. And so it's an excellent point. We have to get better at it. We have to be more responsible, you know. Politics is politics. There's gonna be times where I hate you and you hate me. You know what I mean? But we have to put the party first and help each other, you know, on board and prepare people to run. And, you know, when I was getting ready to be done with Oklahoma Treasurer, I put kind of the open call out, like, if you want to be treasurer, come see me. Let's have discussions. I'll tell you what you need to know, like figure out if you want to do this job. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care if I like you or not, just reach out and we'll have a call, you know? So
yeah. We've ended up having a less smooth transition of power than like the Trump to Biden transition of power. And that's kind of sad.
But it's kind of true.
Yeah.
It's kind of
yeah, because I think like one of the things that I try to do with this show, honestly, is, you know, talk about positions like legislative director or treasurer or things like that, and ask the kinds of questions like, you know, what are some skill sets that someone would need, and, you know, how do you find yourself into those positions, because we're burning out the experienced people at record pace, and there is not like no one on the bench ready to step up, especially, you know, to something like, you know, treasurer of the National Committee. You know, there's just I don't know, not a lot of people out there that are capable of handling that job, let alone want to. And so I think one of the things that I've tried to do a lot of is help people identify where their skill sets fit and bring in, you know, professionals. I talk about the LP at work and at, you know, networking events and stuff like that. I'm trying to bring in finance execs into the party so that we can have experienced treasurers and marketing execs in as, you know, outreach directors and stuff like that. With actually some success in like the city party and whatnot. But that's one of the main goals of the show, is to kind of help people identify that. And you know, it's just been a huge struggle in my mind of the party. Is, you know, I got brought on as, like I said, events director. I've never run an event before. I've never put together a whole thing. I have no clue what I'm doing. But I just ran with it. I was like, hey, this can't be too much different from throwing a birthday party. And, you know, 4 whole people showed up to my last birthday party, so we might as well be good. That's not even a joke. My like 18th birthday party was like tiny. There was a blizzard like the day before, and almost no one showed up. It was like 3 people, one of their moms, and me and my mom. But yeah, I think, we definitely can do a better job at, reaching out to professional people about their specific skill sets and bring them in a way of like, we have a job for you. We have a way for you to use the skill set you get paid for to do something that you might enjoy a little bit more that can save the country.
Yeah.
Come on.
And the other thing we have to get good at too is actually allowing people who aren't in leadership to be involved. So for example, there were years where I was too busy to be in leadership. I had a sick kid, I had, a crazy job at blah, blah, blah. Like I couldn't be in leadership. And I tried to reach out to the Ohio party at the time to be involved in ways that I could and was shut down. You know what I mean? I've seen it in Oklahoma where people have reached out to try to be involved and they're shut down completely because they're not in leadership. They don't understand, they don't have the history. And it's like, no, these guys, A, they want to be involved. So we should let them, and B, it's like, if they're willing to host an event, then let's have that discussion and make sure they host it right. You know what I mean? Otherwise they're just going to go and host it wrong, and there's tons of people, and the people that you're describing are the people most likely willing to help kind of one time every now and then rather than take on a position. They make 6 figures. They've been doing this for years. They've got 5 kids. They're not going to be the treasurer of the party, but they might step in and help the treasurer build a budget once a year. You know what I mean? And that'd be great. If you have a guy who can step in and be the deputy treasurer and build a budget once a year, like that'd be huge, So.
Yeah. And that speaks to what you were talking about earlier of kind of, lightening the load for the elected officials. It would lower the time commitment bar for the leadership if they actually let the other people help them. And so it's a catch-22. They're burning themselves out faster than they have to because they themselves are choosing to not take help from outside. And like back to just like the events thing, there might be somebody who will throw some sort of big event of like a speaking event or a protest or something like that, or a fundraising dinner that they're experienced with doing that, but they're not going to help you plan the fucking convention.
Right. No.
That's below my pay grade. It sounds boring. I don't want to do it. But you want to host a thing where, Killer Mike comes out and talks to some people. Like, I'll plan that because I get to meet Killer Mike.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I mean, it's like, not everybody wants to sit on a Zoom call every 2 weeks for a whole year to plan a convention. Some people just love that stuff, and other people will do it because they have to. You know what I mean? But there are a lot of people that just aren't going to do that. But they might be the ones that can get Matt Kibbe and Hannah Cox to show up at your convention. You know what I mean? So why not reach out to them and just be like, hey, can you coordinate X, Y, Z? You know what I mean? You don't have to be on the convention committee. I wasn't on the convention committee this year. I wasn't on the convention committee, but I helped them with the budget.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And it was just like, I don't have time to go to the meetings. I'm doing the national thing, but I'll help you with the budget. You know what I mean? Let's just work through it, and you can ping me whenever you need to. And that was a great use of my time. It was 1 hour a month instead of 5 hours a week, but they got exactly what they needed out of me. And that's what we need to do with some of these professionals that are willing to offer time, but aren't willing to take on a serious position. So.
Yeah, because where I live in New York, if I reached out to the state party, I'm kind of talking. I don't know about the new leadership. There's a new chair and a couple of new people in New York, but it's very much the step up kind of replacement. The former leadership didn't fight them. Let's put it that way. And when I reached out originally, pretty much the only thing I could do is become the county contact because we don't have a county affiliate yet where I live. And so there's no other job to have other than interim chair / county contact. Like that's the only thing I can do is try to bust my ass to get 11 people in a room together to sign an affiliate agreement and become a county
Right.
And I would have to find an XCOM to fill all of that before I could then, if I wanted to go back to just being events director or something like that, you know, I could then do that after I've found 7 other people to run a county party for me that I can then do events for.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah. It's we get this, you know, a Facebook message in Oklahoma, and it'll be like, you know, I live in blah blah county. And our answer is like, and you know, how do I get involved? Our answer is like, great, we have nobody in that entire region of Oklahoma because like 18 people live there. You know what I mean? So like you can be the regional chair and the county chair and sit on the XCOM. It's like, dude, I just asked who I can go have a beer with. You know what I mean? And we're signing them up to be on the state XCOM, the county chair, the regional chair, and it's like, no, we have to get better at not sounding desperate. It's like, yes, we found somebody in Northwest Oklahoma. You know, it's like finally somebody in Northwest Oklahoma reached out to us. You know, it's like, I mean, and then also find other ways for them to get involved and we have to do more. You know, these states are big. New York's huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's, you know, people aren't going to drive 5 hours to do this and that. And we have to get better at hosting things that people can go to, you know what I mean? And online get-togethers and things like that of that nature, and or a speaker series and just things that people can get involved in, and probably worth thinking about how we can coordinate that between states also. So like if New York's not doing anything, but Indiana's got something cool going on, you know, let's invite people to get in on that Zoom on Indiana, you know what I mean? And just find ways to allow people to get more involved. Because frankly, most of us didn't jump right into leadership. You know, I was libertarian for 4 years before I got into leadership. So, and most people were longer than that, you know, so.
I was for a single meeting. I got elected. I got elected to leadership twice in a row within my first meeting because I showed up to the county next door's meeting and talked to the state chair was visiting at the time, and so the county chair and the state chair both talked to me, and they were like, "Oh, you're from Oswego County? All right, you want to be the county contact?" And so right away, and then I dipped out of there, moved to New York City, and my second meeting in New York got elected events director.
That's so funny because treasurer is usually the position that everyone's like, yeah, I became a treasurer on my first day in the party because nobody ever wants to be treasurer. So they just look around the room and somebody's like, well, I'm an accountant, and boom, you're treasurer.
Now you're treasurer. Yeah. My mom's like username on almost everything growing up, like Hotmail and AOL and all those other things, was literally treasurer for all, because she was my sister's Girl Scout troop treasurer. She was my Boy Scout troop treasurer. She was like every different organization in the church's treasurer. She's like everything, because she has a bachelor's in accounting and outranks everybody else in the room on that area. I think back to just like the having ways to get people involved. I think something you guys do that we do not in any way, shape, or form is the regional kind of structure. We explicitly operate like either state or county. There is nothing in between. And so I'm only 45 minutes or so from Syracuse. When I first joined the party, I was still in the same county I am now, but like 25 minutes from, like 15 minutes from the county line. The county over is the second most active county in the state. They're extremely active. They have multiple events a year. They've got 25, 30 people showing up to their monthly meetings. You know, they outgrew the library they used to meet in and now had to find a new place. Like, they're a great county. You know, Syracuse, Buffalo, and Albany are the 3 that actually do stuff. And so, and I'm not that far from them. And, you know, when I got involved originally, there was somebody that said, you know, oh, just kind of go over to Onondaga County and then it'll be fine. But we don't advertise, you know, multiple county events or anything like that. We could do a central New York event that's got 7 or 8 counties involved and be able to bring some people in that had nothing to go to originally. But we just don't do that at all. And it's kind of Western New York does it, but that's because those counties have kind of organized together and decided that they're going to share resources, not because the state said anything about it.
And I'll be honest, we've had mixed results on it. We've had the county structure in place for quite a while. There are certain counties that do really well. Regions. There are certain regions that do really well. There's other regions where the county inside the region is the one driving it. You know what I mean? And they would do fine if it was just the county. But I like the region structure because, for example, like when I was running Tulsa, I'm in Tulsa County. Tulsa County kind of ran the Tulsa region. You know what I mean? Because we had everybody. Well, when I became not the chair of the Northeast region anymore, somebody from Bartlesville did, and they recruited a bunch of people from Bartlesville. You know what I mean? So like, so the nice thing about the region is you can start to grab people from other counties, and where you're strong in one, you're, you know, and you can host more events. The downside is, of course, the events are further away. You know what I mean? If you're in one county, it's a lot easier to get people to show up inside that one county. But if you do regional events right, and they're, you know, not every weekend and stuff like that, but you've got like 4 a year, you know, you can get people to show up, and we've had some good success, even in kind of the outlying counties, but specifically the bigger counties, you know, Oklahoma City type counties, we get a bunch there. So regions work, I think, and national, you know, shows that we do regional events at national, and those are, you know, several states will come together and do regional events. So I mean, it does work. And it does give people something to do, and they're good fundraisers and things like that. So we like it. But I'll say that there's winners and losers. Like there's been good and bad with it. And it even came up this year whether to kind of kill them all and this and that. So there's always discussion, but we've kept it thus far. So.
Yeah, I think it's very strange that an organization that's made up of mostly libertarians and anarchists who believe that borders are a fallacy and shouldn't exist, that we do almost everything based off of these made-up fucking borders. There's even some states that operate off of like congressional districts as their regions, and they get shifted around every time it gets redistricted. And it's like, why would you listen to the federal government as to how to organize your thing? Like, in my opinion, it makes absolutely no sense that New York City is part of the New York State Party at all. You know, we talk about separating the state itself. We should separate the party. And the like Northern New Jersey, New York City, and Connecticut state party would be so much more successful than the New York State Party currently is at doing anything in New York, because no one from upstate knows shit about how New York State works, and there's only a handful of us that have lived in both that actually know what we're talking about for both.
And that's actually the biggest argument to keep the regions in Oklahoma, because the Tulsa region and the Oklahoma City region are so different than the other regions. You know what I mean? They're kind of 50-50 red, blue. You know, they're very, very different types of libertarians than out in the sticks. You know what I mean? Most of the ones out in the sticks are agorists, and they're living on mountains and this and that, you know, and in Tulsa, you know, people are, you know, they all used to be Democrats and this and that. So like, I'm the most conservative person in Tulsa, you know, and so it's just really interesting.
We can't all be Rex Longhorn.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yes,
I wish we could, but we can't.
So, but yeah, they just have very different constituents down there, you know, and fantastic people, but very different. And that's what we've always talked about in the regions. Like, you know, our Tulsa, I can think of a couple of specific, you know, events that we ran in Tulsa that would not fly down there, and vice versa, you know. So so.
Yeah, and it taints like the messaging abilities and everything, because I mean, I wish it wasn't true, but if I'm up here in bumfuck nowhere, New York, talking to somebody, and I'm like, hey, you should follow the Libertarian Party of New York on Facebook, and they go, okay, cool. And then 2 weeks later, they see them post like, hey, we're going to be at the Pride Festival. Come and check it out. That might be a problem. I wish it weren't true, but it might be, because, you know, I talk to a lot of like hardcore right-wing Christian conservatives because, and, you know, the no king but Christ is a really good message for libertarians towards like the Christian auth-right kind of people. To kind of pull them out of that authoritarianism. You know, there's a whole lot of Bible verses I use. And so, you know, but they might be turned off by the fact that, like, sure, gay marriage should be legal by like libertarian philosophical whatever, but the fact that we're giving money to an organization like NYC Pride and you know, going out there and promoting that and being part of it is kind of ick to some people. And
it's true. It's
if there was two completely separate organizations that were doing these two completely separate different types of messaging to two very drastically different groups of people, I think we would have a lot more success.
And even if it was like, yes, we're the same party, but as you can see, there's different parts of the party and you can belong to either. Do you know what I mean? Like we had a big dust up in Oklahoma because I went to, they were naming a street Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? They got themselves a street. And the leader of the organization is actually a big supporter of libertarians. The governor is a Republican, or not the governor, the mayor is a Republican. Do you know what I mean? Like we were all there. And it was a normal thing in Tulsa for it to be like, yeah, this is good. This guy works with all the parties. He likes us. He's been to our convention. You know what I mean? Blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, that didn't sit well in the outer parts of Oklahoma. Do you know what I mean? Like I got a bunch of crap for that. And it's just like, but when you have the regions being a little stronger, it can be like, yeah, you know, there's definitely different sides of that issue inside the party. You know what I mean? And you know, not everybody has to be like Tulsa libertarians.
I heard there was some drama over the like Tulsa race riot day thing, like either last year or the year before too, because you know some LP officials went out to that and got in a whole.
So I was there. I think that might have been us because I took Jorgensen around when she was running, and we were actually with the Black Lives Matter guy, and he took us around and we toured, you know, Black Wall Street, which I've been to a few times, but is a really cool kind of tour to take, and that's where the race riot happened and all that stuff. And of course, you know, then shortly thereafter, I think some of those comments that came out, you know, were taken out of context or not, depending on who you talk to, but big deal in the campaign. So I don't think it was specifically stuff that happened in Tulsa, if I remember right, but it was shortly thereafter. And then everyone went back to, you know, what we had done in Tulsa and turned it into a deal. So.
Yeah. And it's so ridiculous because, you know, it's something that the same people say things like, you know, black people would make the most logical libertarians because they've been screwed over by the government the most, and then turn around and say, oh, we can't say Black Lives Matter or go to a BLM event. It's like, but then how are they supposed to know that we're the logical choice?
Exactly. I mean, I can't tell you how many good conversations I've had down in Black Wall Street. You know what I mean? Like really good conversations that I'm sure other people are not having. Because they weren't, you know, at these events, and it's just unfortunate because a lot of people try and talk a good game. Most people don't even try, but a lot of people try and talk a good game, you know, and then when push comes to shove, they're not there when the conversation needs to happen. Yeah, and that's what we have to do, is we have to be there when the conversation needs to happen. That's when you get people. Is, you know, most people don't want to talk about politics every bit of the day, you know. But when they go to a political event, that's when you can get them to see some of your points of view. So I've never had a bad conversation at one. It's crazy. Like I've never had a bad conversation at one of those events. Nobody's ever like yelled at me and told me I'm a racist. You know what I mean? And this
a lot of people are. I mean, it's the like keyboard warrior mentality kind of thing, but you know, it plays out to your advantage if you're actually showing up to these kinds of things, because you know, people are going to be nicer to you in person. They just aren't going to say the same ridiculous bullshit in person. They're just at least a little bit just scared, you know, for lack of a better emotion there. You know, they're not going to call you a Nazi to your face unless they really, really think you're a Nazi. And if they're just kind of going off of like internet, whatever, you know, they're not sure. And so they'll at least hear you out most often. Whereas online, they can very easily just, throw up the link of like, oh, well, the CNN says the Boog Boys are Nazis and just move on. In person, they can't do that. They have to at least hear you out for a couple of sentences. And that's all we really need most often is a couple of sentences to show that we're not what they think we are.
That's exactly right. And that's why I think it's just so important to show up. And I'm not the best example of that. Like I said, I don't go to a million things, but when I go, I just, you're respectful, you seek out discussion, you listen a lot, you know what I mean? And pick your spots to make your points, and don't force your points in there. Like Twitter, is all forced outward. You're not listening. You're just putting it out over and over again, as fast as you can, and trying to win the argument. If you go to these things and you listen, wait, then make your point at the right time, you can really change minds.
Yeah. So one thing we're doing every episode now is a question from the missus, because she thinks my show is a little too boring with all the politics talk. So she's trying to make it a little more interesting. So her question for you is, if you won the lottery today, what would be the first impractical purchase you would make?
If I won the lottery today, the first impractical purchase I would make would probably be a massive Bitcoin operation. So
I don't know. I might call that practical.
Yeah, some people would, but I think that it's something I've always wanted to jump into, and we're doing a little bit in our business. But I haven't dove into like actually owning the machinery myself, and I think I would basically take a huge slice of that and just be like, all right, time to win the lottery again. And I like taking risks, and I think that would be probably something I would do. Outside of that, I think we'd probably buy a pretty damn big house right off the bat. So
yeah, that's pretty high up on my list too.
Yeah.
It would be, I'd pick a city that I actually want to stay in and actually just buy the place. There was quite a while in my marriage that Tulsa was the #1 city on the list.
There are a lot of little cities near Tulsa. So I live about 100 yards from Tulsa in a city just south of it. And it's a great city. And we've talked about, when I got fired a couple of years ago and decided to buy my own business, like we decided that Tulsa was going to be where we're going to be for a long time. And we've talked about moving, and every time we talk about it, it's inside the city. Like we're still just going to move across the city, to where we can get more land or something like that. And so, there's a lot of nice places around here, and there's also a lot of places where you can get just a ton of land, less than an hour out of the big city too. And kind of have the best of both worlds. So
yeah, that was one of the reasons we were looking there, was because there was a lot of places that we were looking at that were just outside, and because she's a small town girl and I'm a city boy, and we have that conundrum. I grew up in small towns, and I can deal with it, but I have to at least have a city within an hour that I can go to, and there's like an art museum and a sports team and, stuff happening. I need something near me. Tulsa's a big enough city. But yeah, we can get a chunk of land and become like farmers or something like that and still stay within that city area. Same with Austin.
That's why we picked where we were, because it's like, we can get to Tulsa in like 10 minutes. You know what I mean? But we're not in Tulsa traffic right off the bat. So we like where we're sitting, but if we went 10 more miles away from Tulsa, we'd kind of be in that farmland and only 15 minutes away from Tulsa, and that'd be pretty nice too.
Yeah, I need Oklahoma to at least decriminalize recreational cannabis use before it would take the cake.
I don't know if you saw that, but we just had that vote this year and got crushed. And we couldn't believe it. It was bad. We had a feeling it was going to lose because they had played some games and gotten it onto a special election instead of the big election. So you were going to have the wrong people voting, you know what I mean? But, and they just had some good marketing going on against it. So we had a feeling it was going to lose, but no one thought it was going to lose that bad. And that does not bode well for the future of recreational here. So,
was it a bad bill like the one that lost in Ohio? Like a very like corporatist.
It was more of a bad bill. So the Ohio one, I was there when that one lost also. And that one was more because they were basically creating monopolies, if I remember right. You know, just kind of certain people were going to control the industry. In Oklahoma, they were making it very tax heavy, and there were still going to be some penalties for this and that. And it just, there were enough people that actually support cannabis that didn't support the bill, just like Ohio, where they had some weird opposition from the cannabis groups that also heard it. You know what I mean? Like even inside the party, we made a declaration that we were for it, even though it had, you know, aspects that we didn't like. And that was a big deal. Like there were a lot of libertarians that were like, hey, we're not for this bill, blah, blah, blah. It does this and that. And I'm like, guys, you can't fight for 50 years for cannabis legalization and then be against the bill. Like you let it be legal so people stop going to jail and then you fix it. You know what I mean? But let's stop people from going to jail because everyone dies in the Oklahoma City jail. Like that's why we protest there. So let's stop sending people there for a plant. You know what I mean? So, I mean, there are definitely aspects of it. It wasn't as bad as the Ohio bill. It should have passed, in my opinion. Like there wasn't as many things wrong with it as Ohio.
Yeah, with the monopoly style ones, I can somewhat agree with an opposition because if you let it get that bad right off the bat, it's going to be very difficult for it to get better because you're placing incentives in all the wrong places. But, you know, if it's just, you know, a tax thing or something like that where you can champion a tax reduction bill next year.
I voted against the Ohio one. And I believe it passed again, right? It passed eventually after I moved away from there, I think, right?
No, I think Ohio still illegal there.
I might be wrong. I moved away shortly thereafter, but I voted against the Ohio one in 2016 or whatever year that was. And then I voted for this one. So I agree. Like you got to be careful once you put 3 people in charge of everything. You know, it's going to be hard to break that. They're going to have the politicians in their pocket and all the rest of it. So,
So what's going on at National coming up that you're excited about?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have a big ballot access challenge. So I believe, if I remember right, there are 32 states that we have ballot access in right now. So we have to get to 50. After the 2016 election, we had 38. So we're in a much worse position, mostly because Jorgensen got a lower percentage. So a number of states, you know, we didn't get the automatic bid. And then also a number of states changed their ballot access, you know, laws like they always do. It's not the worst we've been in. In 2012, we were at 30 coming out of the 2012 election. So, you know, people are out there saying it's the worst we've ever been in. That's not true. And it was even worse than that, you know, before 2012. The 50 state ballot access thing is a relatively new, you know, phenomenon in the Libertarian Party. It's only happened the last 2 times, you know. So that's the big focus. We put $250,000 in the budget this year. It's probably going to be 500 to 700 next year. I mean, this is going to be potentially $1 million effort. And so we're going to need to start fundraising on it. We're going to need to start doing what we can early. The biggest issue with it is you have to go state by state, learn the law, try and figure out how many signatures you need. And there's only a handful of states that you can actually start a year before.
Right.
So we're laying those out right now. I'm on the committee. We're going to work through like what we can spend money on this year, what states we can potentially lobby versus get signatures, you know, and then 2024 is just going to be a crazy sprint to try and go, you know, the rest of the way. So we might get to 36 by the end of this year, and then we need 14 of them in the first 4 or 5 months of 2024, and it's just going to be pretty nuts. So that's kind of the big focus in my mind. There's a lot of other little stuff going on, but the big focus in my mind is fix the revenue, which has been a problem, and get the ballot access started. And we've got a nice big cash reserve. We got a nice big budget for ballot access this year. It's just about using it smart and getting us back to 50. And that's going to be really, really hard, particularly obviously in your state. It's going to be the hardest one. I could see a pretty good path to 49. That 50th one is going to be real tough. So
yeah, I think the biggest problem. I'll talk a little bit of shit about Larry Sharp, which I never do on air. Not about him, just to his campaign here. I think one of the biggest problems with the ballot access drive in 2018 or 2022 was it was heavily paid, but not well done by the paid staff. I ended up being one of the managers. That's why I wasn't in Reno, as I was still in New York, running the paid staff in New York City, and it was not great. And what really is crazy to me is that we don't try to hire from within. None of his paid petitioners, well, I won't say none because I was one of them, but maybe 7 or 8 of the paid petitioners for Sharp's campaign were libertarians.
Right.
When I feel like if we had planned it out correctly, we could have gotten a couple of houses around the state, whether they're Airbnbs or rental properties somebody in the party owns, figured all of this out and flown out 20 libertarians from across the country who had nothing better to do for 3 months than just stand on a street corner petitioning, and paid them half of what we were paying these outsiders, put them up, feed them, or don't even have to feed them if you're paying them decently, and had killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Feed your activists, which is something we don't do, and get signatures at the same time, where we were feeding random strangers who are going to end up suing us because of some of the issues that happened there.
Suing and screwing. There are a lot of things that could have gone better there. I mean, obviously the convention timing sucked for Larry. There's nothing we can do about that, but that sucked. All whenever you're 80% of your excited volunteers suddenly get taken away during the final push, you know what I mean? That doesn't help anything. I felt terrible about that. There was some funding issues from National that, there's 2 sides to every story, but there were some funding issues there right at the end, that could have gone better, it sounds like. That was tough, because if we had gotten that, we would have had a legitimate chance of not having to deal with what we're about to deal with, which is going to be probably, the most expensive state we've ever dealt with from a ballot access challenge if we decide to go for it. And right now, the goal is obviously 50 state ballot access, but I mean, we're talking about probably the biggest bogey we've ever seen from a ballot access standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, he could have easily gotten the 130,000 votes for to become a party again. I had no doubt in my mind that he was going to do that. When he tried the write-in campaign, I was like, it's not going to happen. But he would have hit that threshold. I have not a single doubt in my mind. He had picked up so much steam since the 2018 race, and the touring with Jorgensen and stuff definitely helped. And he did an entire tour around the state every year since 2018 as well. He stopped in every single county at least once a year. He's doing a lot, but it's just not going to help if we're not on the ballot. I think what we have to do now is the state party just needs to be in a membership drive overload and bring in 1,000 people in the next 12 months that will help us petition in 2024.
And I don't want to get anyone pissed off or whatnot, but we need to find out, that they're committed, because we've heard things, we need to know that New York wants it, and then we can we can drive with you. You know what I mean? But we need, I mean, if we want 50 states, like this, the thing, ballot access would cost like $2 million if National did it alone. We don't have $2 million, right? So, so we have to have states go with us, and we have to fund a portion of it and let the states do the rest of the lifting. And New York needs to do that if we're gonna make it happen, and we want it to happen. But we're gonna have to do a lot of work in New York to make sure, to your point, that we have the infrastructure there to get it done, because that's gonna be the hardest one. Every other one, you know, I think that we have plans in place, you know, not firm plans yet, but the numbers aren't outrageous. You know, I'm not too worried about the rest of them, other than the fact that they're all happening at once, which always is tough. But New York is going to be the hardest part of the whole plan. So.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's going to fuck us in every state is the national convention timing, and the fact that there's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to pledge support until they know who the candidate is.
Yeah.
Because there are people who will petition for Jacob Hornberger that will not petition for Chase Oliver. Yeah. And vice versa.
Yeah.
Vice versa, even more people probably. And his crew is probably a little more exclusive. But so New York isn't terribly factional, and most people here are very for better or worse, party over principle. And so we won't have too much of that. But a lot of the problem is going to be, you know, if Dave Smith is the nominee, you lose a whole bunch of people, and you might gain a whole bunch of people, but they're not people that were there 3 months ago for the training that you were trying to run. Like you don't still have that steam you're trying to build. So we kind of, it's like a wait and then sprint kind of game of, what's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? Okay, this is somebody I can work with.
And there's a bunch of states that won't even let you get petitioned until you have the nominee. So you can't have a stand-in, you know, petition. So that's the other problem with the late petitioning, is a lot of them are, you know, right at that point. So it's just there's a lot of nuance. So luckily we have Dustin Nana as the Ballot Access Committee chairman, and he has had that. I think he's been chairman in the past, but either way, he's been on the committee for a long time. We've got Bill Redpath, who has a lot of experience. We have Jonathan Jacobs and Andrew Jacobs, I think, are both on that committee, if I remember right, have a lot of experience in this realm. And so we've got, and Karen Ann, obviously, is on the team also. So there's a lot of experience there. I feel like we're going to come up with a good plan. I think the question's going to be is, how much can we get done in 2023? So that 2024 isn't such just a grueling path, because what you don't want to have to do in ballot access is thread the needle. And that's basically what Larry tried to do, you know, in 2022, is like, I have just enough money and just enough time and just enough volunteers to get it right through. And then a couple of things went wrong, and all of a sudden it wasn't there. You know what I mean? So ballot access, you know, and I even asked this on the committee, I'm like, do you want to, like, when we were picking the chair, my question to the chair candidates was like, if you had a choice of threading 7 needles or picking 4 for sure and losing 3, which would you do? You know what I mean? Because we don't want to get to the point where we're threading all these needles and we have to be perfect in all the states in order to get to 50 ballot access. You know, there might be a time where we have to drop one, or we have to, you know, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, we have to be practical and try and figure out, you know, what the best use of our money is. But that all gets so much easier if we can lock in as many as we can early, and then we're not trying to thread the needle. We can throw all the rest of our money at the open states. So.
Yeah, because then you run the risk of losing all 7 states if you're trying to thread the 7 needles.
And that's my point, is like, libertarians aren't good enough, you know, to thread the needle on 7 states at once. Like, we have to. If we don't have a plan where it's like we're doing these 4 at a time, you know, so that we're never spread this thin, then we don't want to get to the point at the end where we could end up with 46 states. You know what I mean? That'd be terrible. So.
Back to like the Larry campaign, like, it would have been nice to know that it wasn't going to happen earlier on, so National could have put that money elsewhere. Because I'll stick up for the old guard slightly and say that the actual thing that killed Larry's campaign was his running mate dropping out and pulling a $50,000 check out like a week before the election day.
Gotcha.
That happened right before the LNC decided that they also were going to hold on to their check. And so those both happened pretty much back to back, and he just ended up fucked. But that would have been, I think, the third check from the LNC if it had actually gotten sent. And so, they did put a chunk of money into trying to get Larry on the ballot, and it did not succeed. And, it could have been put into, maybe a city council race somewhere that would have been a victory.
Yeah.
But.
Well, and that's one thing that we talked about this last week is kind of, like, do we do kind of the piecemeal strategy like we've done in the past, or do we fully commit X amount to a state? Like, there's a lot of different ways to play it, because in Larry's campaign, for example, if we had given him all the money up front, would he have gotten there or not if he had all the money earlier? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Probably. I'll say from that being on there,
that's kind of where I sit is, because even Larry, I remember him saying specifically, I wasn't on the committee, but I remember him saying specifically, like, either give me all the money or don't give me any of it so that I can make my plan accordingly. You know what I mean? And that stuck with me, because it's like, if I'm a candidate and I have to get X number of signatures, what I want to know is how many I'm going to have to pay for and how many I'm going to have to fundraise to get, you know what I mean? So it's just a real interesting discussion and strategy, and I'm more of the, like, let's look at every state. Let's look at, Maine and say, okay, Maine in all likelihood is going to be able to get X number of signatures by themselves, which means we're going to have to do Y. You know what I mean? We could talk all day about, how unfair that is and this and that, but the fact is we can guess how many they're going to do, and then we're going to have to pay for the rest.
Yeah.
So let's come up with that number for all 50 states, and figure out how much that's going to cost. So that's kind of what we're working through right now as a committee. And it's an interesting process, a lot of opinions. But I like our committee. It's a strong committee. We've got the money, you know what I mean? We've got the support from the LNC. So I'm looking forward to it. And the other nice thing is ballot access is a really good thing to fundraise for. You know what I mean? We get much bigger donations per donation, dollars per donation on ballot access than other things. And this is going to be a big challenge, which will make it easier to fundraise for. And I think it'll be a good effort nationwide for us. So
I'm going to pose what I know is a false dichotomy, but I'm still going to ask it anyway. In your experience and opinion, local versus like larger statewide or presidential races, which one do you think is the best return on investment?
Yeah, so this is how I would answer that. The best return on investment politically is definitely local, because you can win and you can make a difference, and more people are going to learn what a libertarian is. That being said, in 2020, for example, I ran my campaign for a corporation commissioner. It cost me $1,000 filing fee, and I locked in ballot access for 4 years.
Right.
So ballot access in Oklahoma is worth about $60,000. So that's a really damn good return on investment. Do you know what I mean? So, like, financially, locking in ballot access is a really good return on investment. Politically, getting a city council member, we just had a city council member elected in Tulsa for the first time. It's a huge city in Oklahoma.
Nice.
And we have a libertarian on the council now. I mean, that's enormous. That's probably the first time most of those people have ever heard the word libertarian. And it's going to help every one of our candidates in the second biggest county in the state. That's huge politically. So.
Is that the biggest city that has an elected libertarian to the city council?
Biggest in Oklahoma. I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know of anybody elected to anything like that in a in a larger city than Tulsa?
That's actually a pretty good question. I don't know. I know Riverside, where Hewitt was, is bigger than Oklahoma,
Yes.
I think, but that's a county. You know what I mean? So I don't know about a city council. That's actually an interesting question. That was an interesting race because we didn't even know him all that well, and all of a sudden it popped up like he beat the Republican in the primary, and then it was like, hey, this guy's a libertarian, and I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is. And so I reached out to him, and we all started talking to him, and we all started helping him. And just in the last couple of weeks of his campaign, and then he's been a good member. He became a member and everything after that. But it was just really interesting. Like, there's so many libertarians out there that aren't even involved in the party.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we have to do is start scraping all the, and figure out where the libertarians are running and stuff like that. And, that was a really interesting one. He kind of snuck in there, and we didn't even know who he was till halfway through the race.
One of the things that I'm always shocked with how bad the party is, and a lot of the states are, is like a list of candidates running this year. National actually did a fairly decent job in 22 on doing that, but it especially in the past, even that one was a little incomplete, and like most state parties don't have anything like it. And it's kind of baffling that like you can ask a state chair how many candidates are running in your state under the Libertarian Party, and they will say, I don't know. There's the 7 or 8 that I know, and then I think there's a bunch of other people that filed that I have no idea who they are.
And that it shocks us too. And I don't know, maybe in Oklahoma it's easier to get to, because we can definitely see all the partisan libertarians right on the filing day. Like we can run through the list and see everybody who put L next to their name. You know what I mean? And then we can go through the independents and be like, who here might be a libertarian but said independent. You know what I mean? But the hard part is in Oklahoma anyway are the nonpartisan races, and that's where nobody knew who Grant Miller was. It didn't say anything about libertarian. City council is nonpartisan, so we didn't know what he was all about until he started campaigning. But you're right, and even National gets that list from the states. So like Oklahoma list was fairly complete, but other states list wasn't. Because whatever. And so the states have to get better at figure. And we implemented a political director that helped us a lot. Because that guy basically was in charge of getting all the candidates to get ready for the filing period. So then we basically had convinced everyone to do the running. You know what I mean? So we knew who was running, except for a handful of people we missed. So
that makes sense. I will say, I very much believe that the question I asked was a false dichotomy, because I think the correct answer is both and you kind of gave a both and answer. The political cycle exists the way that it does. The odd years are local, even years are bigger. Like it's how it works. Obviously, there's some states. I guess you guys, I think, have an odd year gubernatorial, don't you? Or no, that was
midterms. Midterms
that
is
was just
gubernatorial.
Man, this has been a long year.
I know.
It has only been a few months since Natalie wrapped up her campaign. That doesn't make sense. But so I think what states and even national should do, in my very unprofessional opinion, is focus on those local races in local years. And the bigger races in the even years. And a lot of people see it as like an all or nothing, one way or the other. We have to spend the odd years prepping for the even years or vice versa, so we can't do both. And I think focusing on local elections in the odd years is how you best prep for the larger elections in the even years. If you get people used to petitioning, used to campaigning, used to like train a bunch of treasurers on campaigns for city council and county council and all these other things, understand what filing looks like, what the periods are like, how running Facebook ads actually works, because most people think it's a lot easier than it is, especially for politics. Get all of that stuff out of the way on the odd years where it's not a very big barrier to entry. It's not that expensive to get somebody on the ballot. get a dozen people on the ballot across the state, win 2 of those elections, and then have an endorsement from a sitting elected official when you try to run for governor, instead of begging duopoly people for those endorsements.
Or have those sitting elected officials run for governor. You know what I mean? It's like once you have statewide candidates who are actually elected officials, they get in the news a lot more. You know what I mean? And it's a lot. It's not like, garbage man Todd is running for state controller. It's, city councilman Powell is running for state controller, and that's a big deal. It's a lot different conversation, and so it's huge. And I think we have 7 or something right now, city council people in Oklahoma. So we're growing. And one thing we did was we actually scrubbed all the city council. We kind of went through the state and looked for opportunities to convert people. And this is like something I had kicked around a couple of years ago when I ran for chair of the National Party briefly. But it was like this national signing day where you try and get people to kind of convert over. And we got a city council person in Altus, Oklahoma, to convert over and become a libertarian. And obviously he was already, he just didn't know it, or had never considered moving. But we ended up having the convention in Altus this year. You know what I mean? Like he's a lifetime member. It was, and all that happened with just, you and I know Kevin and I jumped on a Zoom call with this guy who was 4 hours away from us. You know what I mean? And we talked about the party and talked about the 6 articles we found on him and how every article aligned with the platform. You know what I mean? And he was like, no, and probably 4 days later he called us up and he goes, okay, I was doing the research and I guess I am, so it's like, so I mean, I think people that do only have 3 or 4 council people, in their state could probably double it just by doing a bunch of research on who's saying what in city council. There's a lot of libertarians out there, especially in local government, who are railing against big local government. So,
yeah. I know there's a lot of people watching that are going to hate every word I say about this. But one thing that I saw recently that I actually kind of like was, I'm spacing on the dude's name, but the person that was running for Senate in Arizona, when he had Blake Masters on a live stream talking about like what they agreed on, what they disagreed on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people think Blake was talking out of his ass for that entire stream, and maybe he was.
Sure.
But if that stream existed, but there was an extra 10 minutes on the end where Blake was asked, if elected, will you then change your party affiliation to Libertarian? That's all it was missing. And he could have said yes. The worst he could say is no, and you're no worse off than you were. At least you have him on record saying, like, no, my allegiance is to the Republican Party, not towards any sort of ideals or platform or anything like that. It's to a party, which would have been a negative in a lot of people's minds. Or he might have said yes and possibly followed through on it, and we would have an elected Libertarian in the Senate. Obviously, he didn't win anyway, but, that I feel like if we're having those types of conversations with that extra question on the end of, like, will you become a libertarian officially?
Why or why not? Why or why not? People. I mean, we had Amash who slowly, became not a Republican and then finally over to a libertarian, and it's just, I think there's people out there that are willing to have this discussion, and I think. Especially I think once you get into the big money politics and Senate and congressmen, Amash only did it after he was probably not going to run again and this and that. So it's a little harder when there's a lot of money involved, but at the local level, it's not that hard. You know what I mean? Most of the time, they don't even have to put an L next to their name. It's just a matter of getting them to say, yeah, I'll join the party, and I'll speak libertarian values,
Yeah, I think we can. I think you're right about the bigger races, that it's going to be a lot more difficult. But I think you also mentioned an important thing of like the why or why not question, because like what could we do different as a state party that you would actually want to be affiliated? Because maybe they have just a legitimate fixable concern, or you know, maybe it's a kind of stereotype style concern of like, you know, you guys aren't a real party. It's like, how can we show you that we are? You know, especially you guys in Oklahoma, you have plenty of things to show them. Like, we're a real party. We run real elections. We have maintained ballot access for X amount of years. You know, all of these different things. We have a resume we can show you. But what can we do different? You know, what's the threshold that we need to get in a gubernatorial race for you to actually switch over? You know, find out those numbers and then hold them to it. Hit those goals and hold them to it. And yeah, I think people, there's not enough salesmen in the party. That's something that I get talked about on the show a lot. I just had Brian Nichols on the show, and that was half of what we talked about. We have too many people that are afraid of the no, and so they just don't ask. And we need a whole lot more people that just get told to fuck off most of their day, and so they're not even worried about it, and could just go and make these phone calls and not worry.
One of the most impactful questions I got asked when I briefly ran for chair in 2019 was somebody in New York actually asked me, you know, how many people at work have you convinced to be a libertarian? Do you know what I mean? And my answer was, I don't talk about politics at work. Do you know what I mean? And I thought about that a lot afterwards, and I'm like, man, that's probably not how it should be. Like, I should be talking more, you know, and not necessarily like spouting off politics. I don't need to be a street preacher, you know, but I can put my views out there, you know, in a positive way. And since then, that number has obviously changed, you know what I mean? And and then obviously online and stuff like that, it's changed, and starting to, you know, obviously try and get more and more people to join the party over the last several years. But it was an interesting moment when somebody asked me that, and I had to actually think, like, who is the last person I've converted in person, you know? And no, most of the time we don't ask for the clothes, and you have to if you want to get it. So
we need to take like the evangelical Christian model of you know, to your point, you don't need to be a street preacher. You don't need to annoy people. You just need to kind of live a slightly different lifestyle and you know, allow people to notice it, and then answer questions correctly when you're asked.
Exactly.
You know, you know, maybe just you wait for your moments in chime in. You know, my wife is extremely apolitical, and so I'm being very slowly converting her over. But I don't really want to. I don't need her to be political. I don't want to ruin her life with a red pill. You know, she can kind of stay blue pilled. I'm like, there's a blissful ignorance there that I'm a little envious of, and so I don't need her to be like active in this shit. But it's like when she brings up a topic of, you know, why is this like this? It's like, oh, because government. And you know, same thing with my parents or my sister or something. My sister will call me up and be like, hey, so I saw this thing on the news, why? Or you know, unfortunately I also get sent like screenshots of the LP New Hampshire Twitter from my sister on a at least once a month basis of like, what is wrong with you people? But you know, it's just waiting for that moment and chiming in with the little nugget of verifiable fact that's like, oh, this is like this because this.
How I started working it was, you know, CNN was always on in the kind of break room type area, and I would walk in and they'd be talking about something, and I'd be like, well, blah, 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 blah. And I'd just kind of like leave them with a little, you know, that actually is because the government did this and this and this over the last 3 months. And because of that, this happened, you know, and then all of a sudden it was like tying it in. And then of course, like you said, later somebody would come back and be like, well, why did that, you know, and then somebody would be interested and you'd have another discussion, and, you know, you have 8 more of those discussions, and all of a sudden the last 8 shitty things that happened are all the government's fault. And people start to think about, you know,
Yeah, because the other thing that the like evangelical Christian model gets right is the like you don't save people, God does, or the Spirit or whatever. Because when it comes to becoming an actual like libertarian, not just getting the vote, which are two very different things, I might add. When it comes to actually becoming a libertarian, it's a long process. There are a lot of things that you have been propagandized into believing that you need to unlearn. And you're not going to get it in one conversation. You're definitely not going to get it in one argument. You're not going to get it on one Facebook post or anything like that. It's going to require, like you said, 8 or 9 conversations about why everything that's going wrong in this person's life is actually the government's fault. And they have to connect the dots, and they have to have a couple conversations with themselves without you. And some stupid people, like some really statist people, they have to talk to them and kind of hate that mentality a little bit, get some pushback and defend libertarianism to someone before they even really think they believe it. You know, play devil's advocate and then realize they actually believe what they're arguing. You know, it requires all of that. It's not just 1 or 2 conversations.
And it's not, and it might not even be 8 or 9. You know what I mean? Like I got sick of the Republican Party in 2008, and I didn't leave until 2016. You know what I mean? It was kind of an 8-year process for me where it was like, I hate them. Do I hate them enough to do something about it? You know what I mean? And then slowly kind of went towards the Amash type libertarian over that time period. And I was living in Michigan at that moment. You know what I mean? So I was right next to him and kind of listening to everything he was saying. And I went issue by issue and kind of did the whole devil's advocate thing that you're talking about and said, do I really believe the shit I've been saying about gay marriage? Do I really believe, you know, this stuff on the death penalty, you know what I mean, or cannabis, and kind of go issue by issue and slowly, and I mean slowly, change my mind 1 issue at a time, you know, over that 8-year period, and finally got to the point where it was like, all right, 90% is good enough, you know what I mean? And then over the next 6 years, I got to 100% pretty much, you know, so like, but at 16, you know, was when I finally was enough where it was like, yeah, I'm not a Republican anymore. I have been a libertarian for a while. I'm just going to make it official kind of thing. And so we have to allow people to have that flexibility to take their time, even if it's years, you know what I mean? And we're terrible at that. We're just so bad at that. Like, oh, you want to be a libertarian, but you still believe in the death penalty? Well, then you're not libertarian and you can never be.
Right.
It's like,
and there were so many things like that. See, because I came in the opposite path. You know, I came in through a candidate like with Gary Johnson. So same year you did, but it was I was not registered to vote when I first heard about Gary Johnson. I was 19 years old and was about to vote for the first time, and so I registered as a libertarian the very first time and have been a libertarian the whole time. But I, you know, worked with his campaign. I worked on Larry Sharp's campaign, and then I ran for office myself as a libertarian in 2019, all still while being a fairly pro-war nationalist. Like, it was a while before I agreed with, say, open borders. That was a big one. If you asked me the day I announced my city council campaign who my least favorite president was, I would have said Truman, because he fired Douglas MacArthur and didn't let us nuke China during the Korean War. My mindset was that if we had won the Korean War, the Vietnam War wouldn't have happened. And, you know, which I still believe, to be honest, but I don't know if I believe it enough to justify nuclear force during the Korean War. Maybe a little more aggressive towards China, but that's a whole other conversation. But, you know, I was not 100% a libertarian, and I wasn't until, honestly, after the 2020 campaign and like getting involved with Spike Cohen and some other people like that, that really like pushed me the rest of the way. And I went the little bit that I needed to be full libertarian and then all the way into anarchist very quickly. But it took me a while. And yeah, it's very sad to see kind of the conversations in the party of, like you're saying, like, oh, you believe in the death penalty, you're not one of us. It's like, you can still be one of us. I still welcome your vote. I welcome your donation. I welcome an extra hand in planning and hosting an event. Like, we want these people.
and the issue coalitions are so important. It's something we've talked a lot about, over the last year is we need to. So I mean, we have the anti-death penalty folks in Oklahoma. We just awarded them with the Coalition Partner of the Year in Oklahoma, right?
Nice.
They're obviously a left-wing, organization, and there's some things that people don't like about them. In Oklahoma, it's super right-wing, right? So like, but we found a issue that we both agree on completely, and we've worked together and gotten a lot done. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, issue coalitions are so important. You don't have to agree with everybody on every issue. And let people, people have legitimate beef on different issues. Like there are just a handful of issues probably in the last 4 or 5 years that I finally flipped over all the way, and I still understand what other people are saying. You know what I mean? If you were to start arguing for the death penalty right now, I get it, because it wasn't that long ago that I was making the same arguments. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and you're a lot better at arguing our viewpoint if you remember that you used to get it. That you used to understand and make those same arguments, rather than just say, you're a terrible libertarian. You know, everybody's got these short memories, like they were a libertarian forever, and you almost have been, you know what I mean? But most people haven't. Most of us came from someplace else.
I still I came into politics in general with the Romney campaign in 2012. Like, Mitt Romney is the reason that for probably 10 years of my life I said I want to be president when I grow up. Like, that's shit I have to live with, I speak to people who still believe that kind of stuff. I talk to Trump supporters and super right-wing like Republican types and super like Christian conservative-y types, and it's not that hard to talk through a life transition that you've gone through.
Exactly.
If you can maintain that empathy. And a lot of people want to like take the moral high ground and talk down to people like, oh, well, I got over that shitty mindset, why can't you?
Right.
And they don't want to. I feel like especially people of my generation find it hard to have that empathy for people older than us, because it's like, I got over that dumbass mindset at 19. You're 45. What's wrong with you? You should have learned this by now.
Exactly.
I get that a lot when I talk to my dad, and it's like, you just have to maintain that empathy and the understanding of like, you thought this too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I understand where you came from. I've made that exact same argument before. You know what I mean? This is what changed my mind.
Yeah.
So I looked into it and I found out X, Y, and Z. Maybe you haven't seen that, or maybe you have and you don't believe it or don't care, but this is what I found that changed my mind.
Yeah. It's the feel, felt, found method of sales. I used to feel the same way, right? I understand how you feel. I used to feel the same way. But until I found out that blank, that's
exactly right.
Super simple. Which, once again, more people in like the party need to understand sales, because life is sales.
Exactly right. And people totally get it. They're like, okay, this guy used to be just like me. He found out something different, and he just told me something I don't know. So I can either react to it now, or I can go home and Google it. You know what I mean? And who knows where I'll end up 4 years from now,
Right.
So.
It's all about planting those seeds.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to tell people how they can get involved with OKLP and LP National, and what kind of people you still need on some volunteer teams, whatnot.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, National, the best way to get involved from a donor member standpoint in National, I think, is to become a monthly donor. I'm making a big push in National, just like we did in OKLP, to try and move more and more people to monthly donors. It makes our life so much easier from a budgeting standpoint, so much easier from a strategy standpoint for ballot access going forward and whatnot. So become a monthly donor if you haven't been already. You can be as low as $5 a month, and it's just huge for us. From a volunteer standpoint, We have several committees. I'll be honest, they're fairly hard to get on because we get a lot of applicants, you know what I mean? But there's always openings. So keep an eye out for that. But I would strongly suggest getting involved in state parties. I think that's where you learn, all the things that you need to know about how to run a party. If you want to get involved in national, start at the state and local level. But I would say state. A lot of people say local, county and stuff like that. I would say state if you're really amped up to go. When I got involved in Oklahoma state party politics, that's when I really started to make a difference in the state and decided that national was right, as an eventual move. And I think that was strong. But I also would say, and this is something Larry Sharp told me really early on in my journey, before I had even really decided to become a libertarian, that you'll find different things for different people. You have to find where you fit in the movement. Sometimes it's going to be in the party politics. Sometimes it's going to be just as a member. You could be a candidate. You could be a fundraiser. You know what I mean? So try it all, figure out what you like to do, and then focus your efforts, because what we need is people that are active and efficient. We don't need people that are just super active and inefficient, or super efficient but barely active. We need you to be doing what you want to do and be really good at it. And if we can have more of those types of people, no matter what you're doing in the party, we're going to have a much better and stronger party going forward.
Amen. Well, guys, thanks so much for tuning in this evening. We're going to be back here next week with Kim Long and I'm going to space on the other guest's name that way. It's her boyfriend. They actually just got back from Nepal. They climbed Mount Everest, and we're going to talk about traveling and all sorts of stuff. Very non-political episode. So if you're sick of all the candidates and like politicians and that kind of stuff I've been having on, this is the episode for you. And then the following week, we've got Dwayne Lester from Americans for Prosperity talking about how to build a grassroots movement. So super stoked about that one. But Todd, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
Yeah. Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it anytime.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching again. Tune in back here next week. But until then, keep up the fight.